Hey Titans, it's Mr. Spilker here, and I am going to teach you Chapter 9, Section 7, Factoring Quadratic Trinomials. So go ahead and get those notes ready. 9.7, Factoring Quadratic Trinomials. Alright, just a quick review of factoring. Factoring is basically just the reverse of multiplying. Now in Chapter 9, Section 3, we learned how to multiply two binomials together. Hopefully you remember from back in Chapter 9, Section 3, that when we multiplied two binomials together, the outcome most of the time was a trinomial. In this section, we're going to learn how to reverse that process. We will start with a quadratic trinomial, and we will transform it into its factored form, which will consist of two binomials. Once again, the process of taking a sum and writing it as a product is called factoring. So in this lesson, we're going to focus solely on factoring quadratic trinomials that have a leading coefficient of 1. So every trinomial we factor will start with a positive 1. Now if the leading coefficient is 1, we want to quickly look at where do those other numbers come from. So consider this example. If you were to take x plus 3 times x plus 5 and go ahead and FOIL it, so x times x times 5, 3 times x, 3 times 5, you would end up with x squared plus 3x plus 5x plus 15. And then that 3x and the 5x that come from the outside and the inside could be combined to equal 8x. So in simplified form, we'd have x squared plus 8x plus 15. Now in this answer, look at the middle term. The middle term is 8x. What you'll notice is that number is going to be the sum of the second terms in the binomials. Notice, if you add 3 and 5 together, 3 and 5, if you add, they equal 8. If you multiply 3 and 5, guess what they equal? 15. So the middle number is what you're going to get when you add the second terms in the binomials. And the number on the end is going to be what you get when you multiply the last two numbers in the binomial. So you add to the middle, multiply to the last. Alright Titans, let's take a look at our first example for the night. X squared plus 7x plus 10. So to factor this, once again I want you to remember that trinomials, when we factor them, are going to become two binomials. So we're going to have two sets of parentheses. Trinomials become binomials. Alright? Now, since we know that the leading term is x squared, remember that the leading term always comes from the f in FOIL. So I want you to think, what multiplies to be x squared? And that's correct. The only thing that multiplies to be x squared is x and x. So we know that the first term in each binomial is x. Now, what we have to do is we have to think about the middle term. The o and the I, when we combine those two, they're going to equal 7. So when we add o and I, we get 7. And the last term comes from the multiplication. So we need to find two numbers that multiply to 10 and add to 7. So think of 10. What multiplies to be 10? Well, 1 and 10, 2 and 5. Can we think of anything else? Nope. So it's just 1 and 10 and 2 and 5. So if you look at those factors of 10, which of these can add to 7? That's correct, 2 and 5. So we'll go ahead and fill in x plus 2 and x plus 5. So you draw your parentheses. You know that the first term in each binomial is going to be x and x. Then you got to find the multiples of the last digit. And then you have to think, which combination of the multiples can add to the middle and multiply to the last? You fill those numbers in, and then you have factored your trinomial. Alright, our next example is x squared plus 9x plus 20. Once again, you see that the leading coefficient is 1x squared. So therefore, we know that the first term in each binomial is going to be x and x. Now we need to find two terms that add to the middle and multiply to the last. So what adds to 9 and multiplies to 20? Well, once again, what we recommend you doing is taking the last digit and looking at the multiples of the factors of 20. So what multiplies to be 20? 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 4 and 5. Those are all the multiples of 20. So what multiplies to be 20 and adds to 9? As you can see, 4 and 5 are the combination. So it's going to be x plus 4 and x plus 5. Because multiples of 20 that add up to be 9 are 4 and 5. Alright, let's go ahead and look at our next example. And as you can see, this one looks a little bit different. This is a little bit different because as you can see, we have a negative middle term. So let's go ahead and take a look at what this would factor to be. Well, once again, guys, we can see that the leading term is x squared. Whenever the leading term is x squared, you know that your first two terms are going to be x and x. Now, it's the same concept. We need to find two numbers that add to the middle and multiply to the last. So we got to think, once again, what are the factors of 20? Well, they are obviously 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 4 and 5. Now, is there any way to get any of these factors to add to be a negative 12? Well, think. Negative 2 and negative 10. What are negative 2 and negative 10 when we add them together? Well, negative 2 plus negative 10 is negative 12. So that would be my combination. And we also like negative 2 and negative 10 because not only do they add to be negative 12, they multiply to be positive 20. So they meet our criteria. They have to add to the middle, multiply to the end. So our answer would be x minus 2 times x minus 10. Or you could flip the order around. Remember, multiplication order doesn't matter. 4 times 3 is the same as 3 times 4. So it doesn't matter if you listed x minus 2 times x minus 10, or as we did here on the presentation, x minus 10 times x minus 2. Either answer is acceptable. Alright, let's go ahead and look at this trinomial. Right here we have x squared plus 15x plus 20. What are the multiples of 20? Do any of them make 15? Well, as we've listed before, the multiples of 20 are 1 and 20, 2 times 10, 4 times 5. Can any of those add to be a positive 15? And the answer to that question is no, not possible. So when an expression cannot be factored, it is considered to be prime. Alright, Titans, it's so important that you go ahead and try this now. Even though it might have looked easy or sounded easy as we went through the presentation, right now we need you to try this. So go ahead and try number 1, try number 2, and try number 3. Realize that all of them are trinomials. Trinomials, when you factor them, become two binomials. Since they all have a leading coefficient of 1, you know those first terms in each binomials are going to be x and x, x and x. Now, Titans, you need to go ahead and figure out what two numbers belong in those parentheses for these three problems. So go ahead and give that a try right now. Pause the video. Then when you have your answers, go ahead and push play, and you can check your work. Go ahead and pause it now. Alright, Titans, here's your solutions. X plus 10 times x minus 2 for number 1. Number 2 is x plus 8 times x plus 2. And number 3 is x minus 5 times x minus 3. And remember, order doesn't matter there. You could have it switched around, and it'll still be the same answer. Hopefully this information helps you. I hope you have a good weekend. Come to class prepared on Monday, ready to give this some in-class practice and even build upon your mastery of this lesson. Have a great weekend.
Made with Doodlecast Pro.